All living things are made of cells. At the very least, they consist of a single cell. For example, prokaryotic organisms like bacteria and archaeans, and even many eukaryotic organisms, such as many protists, and even some fungi are single-celled organisms. All animals, however, are multicellular organisms, and for most animals, the exception being sponges and their relatives, their cells work in harmony to form tissues within their bodies. Even simple animals like jellyfish and sea anemones are made of tissues. In more complex animals, like humans, no single cell is able to perform all the different functions that are needed by the human body. Instead, through maturation and differentiation, each cell specializes to perform a relatively restricted range of particular functions. While there are trillions of individual cells in the human body, there are actually only about 200 different types of cells. So what are the tissues found in the human body, and what are their basic functions? Let's look at these now.
Histology is the study of tissues. A histologist is a scientist that practices histology. Histologists recognize 4 basic types of tissues in the human body: epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and neural tissue. I'll briefly introduce you to each of these in a moment. But first I must clarify. A tissue is not merely a collection of cells. Cells are a component of a tissue. The reality is, however, that cells are not just part of a tissue, but they actually make the other components of the tissue that they are part of. That is to say, cells produce chemicals and secrete them into the immediate environment outside of their membranes. This environment is the extra, for outside of, cellular environment. The extracellular environment is a matrix of proteins and fluids of varying viscosities or thicknesses depending on the tissue types and the cells that produce them. So ultimately, it is the cells plus their secretions that collectively form distinct tissues. Humans possess 4 tissue types. I'll give a more complete description of each type of tissue in upcoming videos. But for now, here are the basic functions of each. Epithelial tissues cover exposed surfaces. They also line internal passageways and chambers of hollow organs, like the chambers of your heart or lungs. And epithelial tissues can produce glandular secretions. Connective tissues fill internal spaces. They provide structural support, and in some cases, they store energy. For example, adipose tissue or fatty tissue is a type of connective tissue. Muscle tissue contracts to produce active movement, and neural tissue propagates electrical impulses and carries information from one part of the body to the other via electrical impulses. So in summary, we have learned that histology is the study of tissues, and that the 4 basic types of tissues that form all body structures in humans are epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle, and nervous tissue. We will see shortly that these tissues are the building blocks of all the organs of our body, and it is those organs that form the 11 organ systems in humans. But before we deal with organs, or organ systems, let's continue on in our study of tissues by taking a deeper look into epithelial tissue next.